Could you introduce yourself and tell me an overview of your life history?
Okay, well, my name at the moment is Eva Menkin. I've had lots of other names. I was born Eva Zacharias in Germany, in Berlin, and it was pronounced...
In what year?
Pardon me?
When were you born?
In 1923. That makes me 90 years old. In Germany, I was known as Eva. Okay. I have written a book about all of this, and the book is called A Moving Experience, because I moved constantly, but also it's a double entendre. So, when I was in France, I was Eve, and in Spain, I was Evita. And here people ask me, do I want to be Eva or Eva? So I'm Eva. So that's a long way to tell you that my name is Eva Menkin now. But after I was Zacharias, I was also von Fritsch. My mother married an artist and a baron, who was called Freiherr von Fritsch. And my mother was Frau von Fritsch, and I became Fräulein von Fritsch. This is a little tongue twister, and I didn't use it very often, just when it was convenient. All right, I have a long and interesting history, which is explained in this book, A Moving Experience. I live in Santa Barbara now, and have been in this country since I was 11 years old. So my book is mainly about my childhood in Germany, in France, in Spain, and consequently in the United States, where I was a refugee among many. But my mother and I came over here so early in 1934. And we left Germany in 1932, which was unheard of because it was before the Reichstag even. But my mother worked, here comes John, my mother worked in a newspaper, and all of her friends were newspaper people or artists or writers of some kind.
A newspaper in Berlin?
In Berlin.
Mm-hmm.
It was called the Vossische Zeitung. And these people knew that Hitler was having a strong movement and following.
Well, when did Hitler come to power?
In 1933.
Okay.
I think it was 33 that he was actually elected.
We
were already out of there by then.
But they could tell that his way of being was coming to power. All of these newspaper people did, and they felt that the Jews were in great trouble there. They had read Mein Kampf. They had done all their homework, which a lot of integrated Jews had not done at all. They felt very comfortable in Germany. They had professions. They were doctors. They were lawyers. They had made good money, and they thought, well, not me. We're okay. And the fact that Hitler was going to wipe out the entire Jewish people, not only in Germany, but in all the countries that he conquered later, that never entered their minds. So,
And both your parents were Jewish, right?
yeah. So these, yeah, all these, not all of them were Jewish. Not all of these newspaper people were Jewish. Many left who were not Jewish, but who just couldn't stand what was going on in Germany anymore.
And maybe that's a lesson to today, that maybe newspaper people can see into the future more than some people can, and if newspaper people are talking about something, you should pay attention.
Well, not all newspaper people. There are, you know, there's the New York Times, and then there are other papers who are less informed, or so there. I think it is a lesson for everyone that we need to stay informed as to what goes on, not only with Jews today, it's the Islamists, it's all kinds of other people who are being pointed to, even though certainly not killed like Hitler wanted to wipe everybody out. I don't think even these informed people ever could imagine what happened. We left.
Well, actually, could you start in your younger years? What do you remember of your life in Germany?
Okay, my life in Germany. When I started the book, I was 6 years old, and I lived with my grandparents. My mother and father were divorced when I was 1 year old, which was highly unusual even in Germany. And my mother was gone most of the time because she was working, and she was living with a group of her friends. And she never had enough money, and neither did anybody else. Money was always an issue.
Was she kind of bohemian?
I would say so. They were all bohemian. They lived on very little. They loved each other. They shared what they had, both in Berlin and subsequently in Paris when they all left. If somebody had a bottle of wine, they shared that. If somebody sold a story, they shared the money. But they didn't call themselves a commune or anything like that. They were just a group of friends. And my mother was very attached to them. I knew them too, and I was invited from time to time. And, my parents hated the whole setup. My grandparents, I'm sorry, they hated the whole setup. They thought my mother was just not a good parent, or you know. I loved her, and I accepted the fact that she wasn't around. She came at least once a week, and we went to the Tiergarten, which was a zoo, or to we had all kinds of walks and places where we would go, and she was always happy to see me, and we had a much more of a loving relationship, I think, than parents at home who were always critical. So she never was critical. My grandparents were critical.
She was kind of more like an aunt.
She was like a fairy godmother, sort of. She came into my life, and she went out, and then she came back, and I always knew when she was coming. She smoked a lot of cigarettes. I could smell the cigarettes, and she had this little cough, and they all smoked like crazy. It's amazing that I don't have some kind of asthma or something, because smoking was a big thing, and a pack of cigarettes was, like a piece of gold. so, so in Berlin, I attended a school which was a terrible. The photograph on my book shows me entering the first grade, and it has.
You could show me.
It has on it. Okay. It has on it a cone thing.
Point it to me. Good.
You see it? Okay.
Yeah. What is that?
It's called a Zuckertüte in German, and translated that means it's a sugar bag. And children entering the first grade at that time got this filled with candy, and it was supposed to sweeten your life in school, but they lied. Life was not sweet in school, as a matter of fact. It was pretty terrible, because already when I entered school, or when I was there for a year or so, there was prejudice against Jewish children. And in my class there were 3 Jewish children, and there was religion was taught in school. It was not like here in the United States where there's separation of church and state. So the religion that was taught was a Christian religion, and the 3 Jewish children were sent out every day at some point, and we had our own little group, which was not very large, and were taught the Hebrew alphabet, which I remember a few letters still from that. You do remember what you learn in the first grade.
And was this a public school in Germany?
Yeah, it's a public school. And since children are cruel anyway, the 3 of us were hassled, and not only by the children, but the teacher, a terrible teacher, a man. And so school was a very unpleasant experience, and it isn't anything like an American school, which I later thought was wonderful, because the school had nothing to offer other than reading, writing, and arithmetic. There was no gym, there's no baseball, there's no plays in an auditorium, there's nothing at all. I'm talking now about 1929, 1930, so I am sure that by this time Germany has a totally different concept about schools and everything else.
Today is 2014.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going way back into history, and since I have lived this long, it's a long time ago. So I was not, in my family, as I learned later, in many families, not only German, but also in the United States, children were not really taken into consideration about anything. I think it's better, and it certainly was better in the United States when I came. But nobody thought of children as real people. They were not to be consulted about anything. So when we were moving, or when anything happened, I didn't hear about it until it had happened. For instance, one day my mother took me out, as she usually did, and she said, "I have something to tell you." And I always thought, when they first say, "I have something to tell you," it's bad news.
And were you about 8 years old at the time?
I was 7.
Okay.
And she said, "I got married again." Okay. Well, she was already married. I mean, she wouldn't have. tell me she was going to get married. She had married this man, and he was she said he was a wonderful man. He was an artist. He was a baron. And I said, "What's a baron?" And she said, "Well, that is a very high position in Germany."
Was he Christian or Jewish?
He was not Jewish. He was brought up in a military family, and but he soon shed all of that, and he became a part of this group which I had described that lived together. He didn't live there, but my mother met him through the newspaper. He worked at the Vossische Zeitung as well. They were married in England. I didn't even know my mother was in England. So I was never informed about anything. It's one of the reasons it's called a moving experience, because I kept moving, but I never knew when or how or where. So she said, "We're moving in with this baron who is called Freiherr von Fritsch, and we're going to Ibiza." And I said, "Oh, Ibiza, where is that?" And she said, "It's part of Spain. It's an island in Spain. And in the Balearic Islands, it is the smallest island, or one of the smallest islands there." So lo and behold, we went to Ibiza.
And how did she end up there?
Well, he had a place there. It was a little artist colony there, but that was all. People came. Very few people even knew it existed. So it was very few artists and writers had been there in the 30s, and we had this lovely place on a hillside looking the Mediterranean. He was very nice to me. He showed me his paintings, and he let me paint. And he taught me how to swim in the Mediterranean. But there was a problem. And I had known of this problem before because my grandparents fought a lot. And you could hear them through closed doors and everything else. They were yelling at each other. And my father and his second wife, Baba, also were yelling at each other a lot. And so I, as a 7-year-old, thought, when people got married, that's what they did. They went in a room and yelled at each other. And sure enough, my mother and the Freiherr did yell at one another. And it happened, I don't know whether you're interested in all of this. But,
yeah, it's interesting.
Okay. What he loved to do most was go to the bullfights. So every Sunday there was a bullfight in Ibiza. And my mother's already said, I've heard about bullfights. I'm not crazy about going. "Oh, yes," he said, you must go. Everybody, the whole town goes to the bullfights. And it's wonderful, you'll see. Okay. So we get to the bullfights, and they start sticking the bull with all kinds of spears and this and that, and there's blood. And both my mother and I are just hysterical. Especially my mother. And she said, I'm leaving, I can't do this. And he said, "No, you can't leave because the matador hasn't come yet." So she said, "I don't care about the matador, I'm leaving." And she grabbed me by the arm, and we left. We left through a door, and he stayed. He wouldn't go with us. And, you know, everybody was yelling and so on. We ran all the way home. I mean, this is not a place that has streetcars or cars or anything. You walk. So we ran all the way home. And that was the end of the Freiherr. My mother and I, within the next couple of days, took the boat back to Barcelona, and then the train from there back to Germany. And for a long time I had no idea what happened to the Freiherr. He became I now, in my 90th year, have, and by the computer, learned all about him and have met people who have known him in Germany and in England, where he resided in Cornwall. And unfortunately, I never got to know him after that. I would have liked him a lot. He was a very interesting man.
Was he involved in World War II?
He was involved in World War I, and he was involved.
For the
he
Kaiser?
He had a name, von Fritsch, which was a very well-known name in Germany at that time. He was related to this von Fritsch. I think it was his uncle or a cousin or something. General von Fritsch, who was a communist, and the Nazis killed him, but they didn't admit to killing him. They said he shot himself, and there was a big to-do about him. And I think the Freiherr von Fritsch went to England and became René Halkett. He chose to do that. Lived in this lovely little village. If you've ever seen the TV show Doc Martin, that is Cornwall, and that is these are the villages that he stayed in. One of them was a translator at the Nuremberg trials, and all the time he was an artist. He created many. I have a painting here of his, which a friend of his who has a museum in Cornwall. I found her, and she sent me a lot of things of his.
Interesting. Maybe in a bit we can see the painting.
The painting's on the wall in the living room.
But back to you're moving back to Berlin when
Yes.
your mom and you left.
When I went back, I had to go back to my grandparents. Okay, and
then what was life in Germany then? Were the brown shirts?
life was beginning to be more. We had been 6 months in Ibiza, so it was. You could see brown shirts on the street.
And what were brown shirts?
Well, they were kind of hoodlums, Nazi hoodlums, who wore brown shirts. And you recognized them, you know. And they started destroying things already. I mean, this was before Kristallnacht, but still, you know, there was a lot of...
Like mainly Jewish things they destroyed?
Yes, yes. And there was enough damage and enough so much wildness going on with these people. I can tell you some stories that you heard. I haven't, you know, and I remember one because it was so gruesome that one of these brown shirts knocked on the door of a Jewish man, and he looked into the peephole to see who it was, and the brown shirt with a pick took his eye out right through the peephole. And those horrible stories were, you know, were told. And I think at that time, my mother and her friends decided to leave Germany. Okay. Now this was no easy task because she had das Kind, that was me, the child, okay? And she wanted to take me along. And
you weren't living with her at the time.
I was not living with her. I was living with my grandparents. My grandmother and my grandfather insisted that this Hitler thing would pass, that they were overreacting, all of these people. They didn't like where my mother was living, and altogether they took her to court. My father, my biological father, who was married to Baba, who I liked, and I would visit them from time to time in Berlin. He came to court and with my grandmother testified that my mother was not able to care for me, and that she hadn't cared for me in all these years, and that she was living with men in apartments, and you know, it was really a terrible affair. And I was, by this time, probably 9 years old. And finally, the judge, the judge asked my mother about her second marriage, and also the fact that she was a baroness, which she still was. Or I don't know if she had been divorced at that time. Yeah, I guess maybe she was divorced, but they still called her, you know, on paper she was still a baroness. And so he was very impressed with that, that she had married a baron. In Germany, that's very, at that time, that was very important.
Did the judge know she was Jewish?
Yes.
How would he necessarily know that?
They just knew. Everybody knew who was Jewish in Germany, you know, in Berlin. And
would you say people looked different Jewish, but they knew for
no,
other
but
reasons?
not you know, some did, but not everybody. But they found Jews, even if these Jews, most German Jews hadn't practiced any kind of religion at all. They were secular Jews and had, as they were in the army, they had been, you know, so integrated. But these Nazis, even if there was any kind of Jewish blood in anybody, they found this out. They were very, very bureaucratic. They learned, they knew everything about everybody. And so then they interviewed me, the judge, and I said I wanted to go be with my mother.
Did the judge ask you who you wanted to go with?
Yes, he asked me. And I had a choice between staying with my grandparents or living with my father and his wife, and I said I want to be with my mother. And then there were all kinds of witnesses for my mother, people that from the newspaper and people she lived with who vouched for her that she was a good mother, that she saw me every week, and you know, so on and so forth. Anyway, she won me.
She won the contest.
Yeah.
And did you feel like the court system was fairly fair in Germany then?
I have no idea.
Okay.
You know, I can only tell you about this court scene, which is very much described in the book.
Show me your book again.
Okay.
This is your book. What's the name of the book?
It's called A Moving Experience.
You self-published this, right?
It's published by my stepson, who published it. And it's published. It has all the right numbers, IBS number, and it is in 2 bookstores in Santa Barbara. Chaucer's and Granada bookstore, and can even be gotten online. But there at Amazon, they usually have used books, but they have them from bookstores.
So your mother won you back, and what
She
happened
won
then?
me back, and off we went to Paris. Of course, nobody told me about this either. One day she came, she said, "We're packing your suitcase, we're going to Paris," you know. And so in Paris, we lived on the left bank. Everybody was very poor. A lot of these people, some were my relatives actually. A cousin of mine, Baruch, I write about all of that here, and his sister Esther, they were with us, and other children. And I could take only a few things. I took a few things.
Do you recall what you took?
It was a dog, a toy dog, and something else, and my clothes, and that was it. You know, I couldn't take very much. I had some seashells from Ibiza that I took, and some treasures that I had in a box that traveled with me wherever I went. Well, you know, right now I'm telling you this story, but in the book, it has more emotion. That is my own feeling of not belonging anywhere, of being, you know, temporary everywhere. I certainly was temporary in this little left bank nest that we had. I described it. It was really a very odd place. Had 1 bathroom for, I don't know, 12 people or something that were living there, and you had to climb up on top of the toilet to flush it because it was one of those, you know, hanging things. But one day, my mother came to me again, and she said, "Evchen," that was my a name that my parents called me, and also my friends and my mother's friends. It's a diminutive in German of Eva. So Evchen, it's you know, as if. So Evchen, she said, "I have something to tell you." And I thought, oh my God, you know, here we go again. So what she told me is that I had to leave this place because the children weren't getting enough food, and enough good food. They didn't have enough money to feed everybody, and besides, the landlord was giving them all kinds of problems and so on, with too many people living there, and the children had to leave. And I was to go to a school for refugee children called the École Europe, which was just outside of Paris. And in Fontenay-sous-Bois. If you've ever been to France, it's a suburb now of Paris, Fontenay-sous-Bois. I think I may need a little water.
Sure. Should we take a quick break?
Yeah, can we?
Okay, sure.
Okay.
Okay, you can pick it up now if you like. Go ahead.
Okay, now where was I?
So you've come back to Berlin.
Okay. No, I went, no, we were in Paris. Now, I was just told I had to leave.
Right.
And so I went to the École Europe in Fontenay-sous-Bois. And that was it turned out to be a good place, but of course it was strange for me.
How was it different? Do you recall?
Well, it was a boarding school. There were children from Russia, because Russia was, there were white Russians who had escaped from Russia, the communists there, and there were other refugee children from Germany. Not all, the Russian ones were not Jewish. It was a very interesting group of children. I don't think they were more than about 15 altogether. And they were all ages. I was the youngest. I was 9. And sometimes that was good because I was taken care of. Other times it wasn't so good because I had to go to bed early. So when everybody else was up and doing things. It was run by a man by the name of Wildangel, Wild Angel. He was a communist, and he loved revolution. He taught us all about every kind of revolution, and he was married to one of his students. He was about 65 years old at that time, and was married to a 19-year-old woman who we all loved because she was sort of our age, you know. I mean, she was close, and she was very lovely, Claire. And so, and then we had another professor who, so there were only those 3 people who were teaching us. In the book, I have a report card in there which said that I was good, and I was a pretty good student, except that I didn't pay much attention, so, and did my own thing. And I wasn't terribly good at French. Well, you know, we were not allowed to speak German. We had to speak French, which was a good thing because, you know, it's the only way you really learn it.
That must have been a struggle, though, to learn French right away.
Yeah. So everything was in French, all of the instruction and everything. Well, you know, I had just gotten out of Germany, and I had to learn Spanish in Spain. I learned that. So this was my 3rd language already, and I hadn't really learned Spanish much, just enough to talk to the children there. So I learned French. And but after, I won't go into all of it was good. I was close to these people, and you know, only 15 of us, so we got close to everybody. My mother would come to visit me, but mainly I went back to visit her, to take a train, all by myself. I was, you know, 10 years old, 11.
Did she have to pay for the school?
It was never clear to me exactly, but not much.
Mm-hmm. And the school?
Somehow it was funded by some Jewish organization and so on. And there were only 3 people. We were all in one house, you know. Yeah, they had a cook. They had to pay, but yeah, I think it was you pay what you can. My mother couldn't pay much. Nobody had money. Nobody had much money there, you know. I think the Russians brought some money with them. I was close to the two boys there. One was Fetja, and the other was Anatol. I remember all those names.
People don't necessarily, young people don't realize now that communism was popular not just in Russia, but in places like France and even the United States.
Right, yeah. Well, it was, before actually, Stalin and these people who gave communism a really bad name. But this professor we had, Wildangel, he just believed in, people dividing up what they have. And we always had jokes about that, because at some point I got lice, and I wasn't the only one. There was, the sanitary conditions were not marvelous. It was horrible. And I offered to share the lice with everybody.
Is that the communist way?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But then my cousin came to visit me, Esther, the one that lived with us in France, and she was very religious, and she thought it was terrible what was going on there. Communism, no, they don't believe in God, and so it was really. She left immediately. She couldn't stand it. So. At any rate, after I lived there for 2 years, and then my mother came to me and said, "I have something to tell you, Eva." And of course we were moving again, but this time we were moving to the United States, and that was because Hitler was on his way to France, where we were living. And again, there were refugees in France, in Holland, and all over the place, but we were always ahead of the crowd. And this was 1934, and my mother said she's getting married again. She was getting married to Henry Fuchs, who was an engineer, he got a PhD in Zurich, had moved to Dayton, Ohio, and his parents were living in San Francisco, and he had gotten out of Germany a year or two before us even. And he had been in France too. I had met him, and we had by this time I was used to this. We were on the move. Well, we left from Le Havre in November of 1934, and went on a terrible ship, and I described the boat right in the book.
Was it a passenger ship?
It was, but it was a very small ship. It was called the Lafayette, and it was a terrible, terrible ride. November is no place to travel on the Atlantic.
Bad seasickness?
Everybody was seasick, and my mother became very, very ill. I have neglected to tell you that my mother had episodes of a mental illness, and I hadn't been aware of it as a child, but became aware of it on the trip, because she just she couldn't handle it, the trip. She stayed in bed the entire time, and I brought her food, such as it was, and we were in steerage, which was called third class, but it was steerage. It was terrible. And so, at any rate, I described the trip in the book. It's, I won't do it here, but it was just an awful trip. And I attached myself to a French family, 2 children, and which was very, very nice for me and helped me. Throughout my young life, I always attached myself to some family. I didn't have one. And so I managed to do that to keep my sanity.
And maybe that's a good lesson to others who have parents who aren't the best parents, to look for someone to attach themselves to.
Right. And I think people do that, you know, to a teacher or to a friend, or it doesn't even have to be a family, but I always tried to choose families of my friends, you know, as a child. And they always took me in, and I always, you know. So, to make a long story short, we arrived in Dayton, Ohio.
Well, actually, in your book you talked about seeing the Statue of Liberty. Huh?
Yes.
Do you remember what it was like when you first arrived?
Oh, it was, well, in the first place, it took us a while to get on the deck from where we were down in the basement of the ship. And it was such an incredible sight to see the Statue of Liberty. But at the same time, I was scared of her. And I don't know, it was so huge. I had never seen anything so huge. And she had a crown on her head, which looked like a crown of thorns or something. And I thought everybody in the United States was this big. I was terrified. And I didn't say anything, but I think I did say something to Henry, my new father, but that, yeah, I described that thing because you know, for all the adults, this meant we had arrived in a safe place.
And did you also go to Ellis Island?
Yes.
What was that like?
Well, we went to Ellis Island because everybody had to go through that, but we went to Ellis Islands because my mother and father got married there. And I say my father because he adopted me and became my father forevermore. I left a father in Germany who was not supportive. He'd never supported me. He never gave my mother any money. And he didn't come surface until he objected to my leaving the country. He and his wife, Baba, went to Argentina. They escaped the Nazis, and there had a son, Rene, who became my stepbrother, my half-brother. And he's 14 years younger than I am, but we are very good friends.
Are you still in touch with him?
Oh, very much so.
That's so cool.
He comes here a lot, much more so. I've been to Argentina only twice. This is a long trip. But he comes here at least every other year, and he has a family. And
so back to Ellis Island, all the immigrants had to come through Ellis Island at the time.
All the immigrants had to come through, and we not only came through, but there's a whole marriage ceremony, which is also described in the book, which was. We were in a separate room with some person who married them, and they wouldn't let us off the ship until Henry and my mother signed papers that they would marry there on Ellis Island, because everybody had to have a sponsor. And Henry was that because he had a job at Delco in Dayton, Ohio.
Did you have to have a job or look like you'd get employment?
You had to prove that he could support us, yes. And yeah, so and the immigrants knew that. Most of them had an affidavit from somebody who sponsored them and said they would support them in case they can't support themselves. Yeah, Ellis Island at that time was a well, it was an interesting place, and I describe it in the book. I didn't remember everything about it. I have a bibliography in the back where I looked up some of the things that I didn't remember that jogged my memory. So they got married and we drove to Dayton, Ohio. Well, it's quite a stretch from Paris to Dayton, Ohio. and my mother had a very, very hard time. Henry was wonderful. He was a great father. He helped us a lot. My mother missed her friends, something awful. You can imagine. She lived with these people all through some really bad times, and she was very attached to them. And here were people who was so strange to her, you know, Middle America, and she was used to working in a newspaper. There's no work. There was no way she could do anything. She was strong in English, which I wasn't. You know, I didn't know any English when I came. So I went to school, and they put me in the first grade. I was 11 years old. I didn't even fit under a desk. And I was the first refugee child in Dayton, Ohio. They didn't even know what to do with me. They came, the sixth graders came to get my autograph. So, yeah, it was really, it was quite bizarre, but everybody was very kind.
And do you recall how the United States seemed any different from?
Oh, it was very different. In the first place, children were paid attention to, and children were asked things, you know. Do you want to go to the zoo? Do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? Do you like sweet potatoes or what? Nobody ever asked me anything, you know. And so children were treated like human beings and as if they had opinions. And I was astounded.
Is that an American thing, do you think?
Yeah, it was an American thing. Nobody in Europe that I knew treated children like that. Again, this may be totally different now, but this was then. We were in Dayton, Ohio. I was having a good time. I met all kinds of children and families that thought I was terrific. They thought I was such a novelty that they couldn't get over it. They asked me questions. In school, I became a novelty, and they couldn't wait to teach me things and so on. And, yeah, I was having a good time. My mother, on the other hand, went into a deep depression. She couldn't handle it. In the first place, she said, "There's nothing to eat here," and there were grocery stores and so on. Well, she said all she could find was Wonder Bread. You know, she said they don't have bread. I mean, this is no bread. You know. She said everything comes in cans. I can't stand it. I mean, there's nothing fresh. And she was carrying on, you know. And it was extremely difficult for her. She was a French cook. She loved cooking, French cooking, you know. Well, there was nothing to do. I loved everything American. I loved peanut butter. I loved hot dogs. I loved, you know, I mean, you know, things I never had. She and Henry, my father, went to Cincinnati to get rye bread at least once a week. And, you know, but she couldn't acclimatize. They weren't the kinds of... people were very kind and wanted to help us, but they were not her kind of people.
And were you aware of the lead up to the World War II and Nazism increasing at that time?
Well, we are still in 1934, okay? The war didn't start until 39, which started with Hitler going into Poland. So that came much later. We were such early refugees that, but Americans were very kind and very, even though they didn't understand what was going on exactly, they didn't know what was going on in the Hitler Germany. Not even the Jews understood what was going on there. And we ourselves didn't, it was worse all the time, you know.
Did you hear some from friends or relatives how things were getting worse?
Well, my grandmother wrote letters, but it took forever to get there, you know. I mean, this is a world of email, you know, so we forget that letters used to take a month from Europe to America. What she did write is that my grandfather was arrested and taken to jail on some kind of charge. We never found out what.
And was he Jewish?
Yes. And he was later taken to a concentration camp and killed there. He never survived. She finally arrived in the United States around 1938 or 39. But in the meantime, what happened was terribly sad. My mother had a complete psychotic break, which at that time they diagnosed as schizophrenic. Today, it would not be diagnosed as such. It would probably be diagnosed as bipolar, because she functioned very well under circumstances that she felt good in. And there were years where she was in very good shape, but she was in a world that she didn't recognize at all. And she had left people in France whom she loved, and she never found anybody quite of that value to her.
In your book, there's an incident, I believe, where a policeman showed up at your house with your mom. What happened
Right.
then?
Yes, that was when she wandered away. And she simply left. We had no idea where she was. And everybody searched for her. She had made a friend here, Patty, who also was close to our family, and she had 2 children. Everybody was looking for her, and finally we called the police, who brought her home. And she had just wandered away.
You find
And-
her in a lake or something?
Yeah, she was by the lake, and the policeman didn't know whether she was going to kill herself or not, you know, and we'll never know. But it was a wake-up call for Henry, my father, and she subsequently went into a deep depression and had to be hospitalized. And she was hospitalized for almost 2 years. And at that time, they didn't have the facilities or so on what they have now. But she was catatonic, which means that she was out.
Not conscious in a
Not
normal way?
conscious.
Uh-huh.
We don't quite know still, I think, what consciousness there is in that state, because some psychiatrists think that people do hear in that state. My mother was sent to a hospital near Ann Arbor, Michigan. By this time, we had moved to, no, we hadn't moved to Detroit yet, but she was near there. And she was out of my life for 2 years, which was difficult, because first of all, I had to be the woman in the family, and I was only 12 years old. So I cooked for Henry, I did the laundry, I did the cleaning. I couldn't afford any help because he had to pay a lot of money to this hospital. And and Henry had been just wonderful to me while I was a child, but now I stopped being a child, and all of a sudden I was his housekeeper and his, you know. So I didn't have the relationship with him as I had previously. I didn't have my mother. So it was a hard time for me. But I had a friend and her family, and I attached myself to them. And they were very kind. I had dinners with them. They brought over dinner to us. They were very good. And I had several friends like this. And then all of a sudden, Henry said, he did talk to me and said, we're moving to Detroit. I mean, you know, this was the first time anybody had ever told me we're doing anything before we did it. Before the suitcase was at the door. So he said he had gotten a good job as at General Motors in the design department or something, and that we're moving. So I had to leave my good friends there again. Excuse me. I describe in the book every time I had to leave what that meant to me and all the people I had to leave. But at this point, I'll just tell you the story. And we moved to Detroit. And then in Detroit, my father said, we moved several times from one house to the next in Detroit. But then he said he's bringing in his mother and father. Well, his mother, I had known in Karlsruhe, in Germany, where they were living. And she was a very severe kind of person. She was a German Hausfrau. And
Jewish also?
yes.
Uh-huh.
And they had emigrated to San Francisco. The grandfather, was lovely, but she was critical, she was unpleasant, she was... Well, I just never liked her. And they came to live with us because Henry decided that I couldn't be doing all the things I'd been doing and so on.
And your mother still was not living with you?
No, my mother was still in the hospital, still catatonic. And but I made friends in Detroit. I went to school there. I went to junior high and high school. But junior high, I met this girl. She came from a very Jewish family, which we were not. When I came to this country, I didn't know anything about Jewish food. People talked about bagels and lox and all kinds of Jewish food that I'd never heard of before. And she educated me, this woman, and every day she would poke her head out of the window and tell her daughter to bring me home for lunch. And that was just lovely. They had Kaiser rolls and all kinds of food. They were all big. They were full of food. They ate enough for lunch that Henry and I would eat in a week.
Did Americans seem to eat more than Europeans?
Well, no. They eat differently, than the French and the Germans. They just have different foods. And my mother could never get used to it. It just, she did afterwards, but before she got sick, there was nothing that could have, that was okay, So my father I suffered under this woman who was supposed to be my grandmother more than any time in my life up to then. I thought it was bad in Dayton when I had to do all the laundry and all this, and I'd go back in a minute to do that because she treated me like I was 5 years old. I had to have my own plate and my own silverware, and I was a child, and here I was 13 years old, and I was in junior high school, and nobody else treated me that way, So
could you try telling your father that?
I did. I tried to tell him, but he said, "Look, don't just try and say yes, yes, and don't make any disturbances. She doesn't really mean it." But everything I did was wrong. I left a ring around the bathtub. I didn't eat the thing she cooked. Whatever. And she was never any praise. Never anything. And my mother wasn't like that. She was always very kind to me. So I suffered through that. But what the most interesting thing that happened during that time, my father, Henry, would go every Sunday to the hospital and play music to my mother. My mother was a very good pianist, amateur pianist. She played all the classical piano. They tried to teach me that, and that didn't work very well. But somehow or other, someone told him that he might reach her with music, okay? The interesting thing is that today they do this with psychotic patients, that they do, music is a conduit. But at that time, I don't think so. So he would take his gramophone and,
A wind-up record?
yeah, and wind up records and, and play. And after being there for 2 years, one day she opened her eyes and she said, "That's a Schubert sonata." Well, he almost fell over, you know, because he'd been doing this for a year and nothing had happened. And it brought her back. And, you know, she hadn't eaten anything in 2 years. It was all IV feeding and so on and so forth. She had lost, the reason they wouldn't let me see her is because she weighed 60 pounds. And they had to keep her in the hospital to feed her. But she started taking food, and Henry came to see her all the time, and she recovered. And she came home, but she had on long boots. I have pictures in the book.
Oh, do you have
A title
So I'm sorry, you have a picture of what there? Can you show me that?
of her coming home with the boots. I'm trying.
Okay, you said you saw a picture of her giving up her title in the newspaper.
Oh, do you want that one?
Yeah, let's see
Okay.
that. So she was interviewed and she gave up her
She
title?
was, yeah, interviewed here.
Just face it towards me.
She was interviewed by in Dayton, Ohio, by a reporter.
Yeah. So that's a picture of your grandmother, it was your mother with your grandparents.
This Henry's parents, yes.
Right. And your mother's on the left of the boots, yeah. So tell me about that.
Well, what happened is before she was hospitalized, she saw a psychiatrist. And she was terribly, terribly agitated when she saw this psychiatrist. And she said she had to go to the bathroom. So he showed her to the bathroom. And that was a mistake, because she jumped out of the window. And it was like, it wasn't, thank goodness, very far, but far enough so that she broke her leg. And this leg, you know, they put in a cast and all of that, but she never had any physical therapy. She was lying there for 2 years. I think they eventually took the cast off, but you know, in order for it to heal, you have to have physical therapy, you have to walk, you have to, you know, and she was just lying there. So anyway, she had to wear those boots for quite a long time.
So she woke up after hearing music, and then she came home.
Well, she didn't come home right away because they had to feed her. She had to be of a weight that was acceptable. She weighed 60 pounds, and her normal weight was probably 120, something like that. 100. She was never heavy, but she was of normal size. So, and she was very beautiful, by the way. That's why the men went. Yeah. So, at any rate, and so she still was lovely, and we were so happy that she was home. But the grandparents stayed for a while, and it was a little touchy, and until they finally left. Okay, and then life became fairly normal, and I'm just going to take you as far as the book goes, which is to the age of 19. Is that okay?
Sure. I may have one or two other questions, but
You can ask questions.
okay.
And in the epilogue of the book, I describe what happened to everybody and to the main characters. What happened then is a young man appeared in our life, and he was sent through a friend of Henry's from England, where he was a refugee from Germany. And he was also a sort of mechanical engineer although he hadn't graduated as such, he'd worked as such in England. And so he came to this country with a referral to Henry. And then he was 19 years old, and I was 15 when I first met him.
And what was his name?
His name was Fred Landecker. And he was a steady Sunday dinner guest. He came every Sunday for dinner. And so we got to know him, and you know, he was sort of like a big brother or something like that. And we would wash the dishes together and so on. And then he'd go home. He lived in an apartment someplace. And when I was 17, on my 17th birthday, he invited me for a date. And that was to go and see Fantasia.
The Disney movie.
Yeah. Do you know that movie?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then somehow we became a couple in a group called Emergers, A-M-E-R, American German, G-E-R. And these were American Jews, young people from a Jewish center who had formed a club to invite German Jewish refugees their age. So we were all an age maybe from, I think again, I was the youngest again, from 19 to 25, something like that. And this group did things together, went to the lake, we went swimming, we did this, we did that, we had a very good time, and those were our friends. And it wasn't long before they coupled up, people coupled up in this group. And so Fred and I became a couple. And then the book ends. In the meantime, my mother was getting better and better. She knew, you know, we had told her we were in Detroit now, and you know, she accepted that and made a life there and started to be a wife again and a mother. Except, you know, by this time I didn't need much mothering anymore. I went to the University of Michigan, but only for a year, because I married Fred Landecker and I was 19. And that's when the book ends. Talks a little bit about the wedding and this and that and the other thing. After that, I mean, I'm now 90, so I had
A few things happened.
a few things happen.
Could you just mention briefly what kids you had and how long your marriage to Fred was, and
Okay.
then your second marriage?
When I married Fred, it was during the war. My parents objected vigorously to this marriage. A, I was too young. B, there was a war on. I didn't know what I was doing, and you know, it was terrible. But we were determined to get married, and we did. And as soon as we got married in Riverside, California, I came to California to marry him. He was stationed in Camp Hahn in.
They wouldn't let him go overseas because he wasn't...
He went overseas.
Oh, he did go overseas? I thought I read...
Yeah, but the first time not. He was going to go into the Pacific, and they found out he wasn't a citizen, and so they took him. They brought him back on the next ship. They wouldn't allow him to stay, which was a good thing, I think. Although
And then you got...
later on he went to Italy. Yeah, he was in the Italian theater.
Okay.
But I was an Army wife and followed him around here, the camps in Oregon, and we started out in California, Riverside. So I had been to California once before in 1939. My parents took a trip out here. But it was a wonderland as far as I was concerned, you know.
How so?
Okay. Well, you know, I lived in all I knew was Dayton and Detroit. So California was, you know, just the flowers were blooming everywhere. It was you know, we came, I think, in the fall, something like that. But you know, it was just a beautiful spot. And after the war, Fred and I settled here. And we were married for...
In Los Angeles.
In Los Angeles. We were married for 30 years. We had 4 children.
And their names?
Judy, David, Anita, and Peter. Okay.
And where are all of them now? Your kids?
They're all what?
Where are all your kids?
Are they all now? Well, David is here and has 3 children.
David Landecker.
David
Santa
Landecker
Barbara. Yeah.
is here in Santa Barbara. He has a daughter from his first marriage who is 31, I think, and another daughter, her name is Ariana, and another daughter called Tamara, who is named after my mother. My mother's name, she named herself Tamara. Her parents named her Gertrude, but she didn't like that name. So she named herself Tamara, and her friends called her Tay, T-E.
And your other kids?
And so that's David, and then he had 3 children. He has Michael, who is here at the moment, but he just graduated from college, and Tema graduated from high school and is going to City College here. Then Judy didn't have children. She lives in New York. She's an artist. She's married. Anita lives in Santa Monica. She is an urban planner and was married to a wonderful man who unfortunately died a year and a half ago. It was very, very awful for our family and for his children and everybody.
What are the names of their children?
And the children, they had Aaron. Aaron graduated from RPI, Rensselaer Polytech in New York, and immediately got a job in the Silicon Valley in a startup. He's design engineering. Then they have twins, Anita, and that is Hannah, who is in China somewhere. Not China, but in Asia. She goes to Berkeley, and she's in her junior year abroad. And then there is Jake, her twin, who is at American University in Washington. So they're juniors, so they just have another year to go. And Peter is my youngest son, and he is married a French-Canadian lady and has since lived in Quebec in Canada, and has 2 children, and that is Sabrina, who is also, she's studying art and psychology, and Sasha is also in engineering. and he's going to Sherbrooke University there. So they're all, you know, I was an only lonely child. I have 11 grandchildren. I forgot to tell you that, well, you know, I haven't gotten to the rest of my story. That after I lived with Fred for 30 years, we were married 30 years, after which we really grew apart. I went back to school, studied psychology, became a therapist, and he was totally involved in a business which he was selling and so on, and we just had very divergent paths, and the marriage had worn itself out. So then we divorced, and a few years later I married David Menkin, whom I had known in Los Angeles, and we were together for 30 years. And he came with 2 sons who I am very close to, and they're part of my family. And one son is not married and has been meditating in India, and also is back now in Boston, but he's a lovely guy, but he is not of this world, sort of. And Bill is very much in my life. I knew them both as children, and he is a teacher in San Jose, and married Betty, who is a doctor, and they have 3 daughters. The oldest is married, Nora. She has a child, Sammy, so I'm a great-grandmother. And then they have Eileen, and who is a therapist. She's a physiotherapist. And then there is Josie, who's studying at UCLA. She's getting a PhD in gerontology, and is getting married to her boyfriend, whom she's been with for 6 years, in August. And they're part of my grandchildren, so there are 11 of them.
I knew Fred as well as Bud, and Bud had quite a distinguished career also. What were some of the things he invented?
Oh, Bud was an incredible person. First of all, he invented a bottle which became extremely popular, and every doctor has one. It's an alcohol container, which I'm sure everyone has seen at their doctor's office, where you take a piece of cotton and there's a pump that you put the cotton in, and then the alcohol comes up. And you just get the alcohol that's on the piece of cotton, and you don't have a whole big fat mess. And so this became called Menda Products, and so that really was his business. And he had a partner in this business, and he brought the business here to Santa Barbara, actually, and had a secretary who said, and very soon thereafter retired. And in his retirement, he became a consultant for small business. He was very good at advising people how to run their small business and what to do to make some money without needing to make a whole lot, you know. So,
And what do you do with, and he passed away how many years ago?
7 years. It was 7 years just a couple of weeks ago.
And you're 90 now, and how do you spend your time?
Well, I went back to school and became a therapist and had a business here for many years, and was a therapist in Santa Barbara for 25 years. Both, so I saw both individuals, families, couples, but I also worked for the Arthritis Foundation and some other groups in town as a consultant. I retired about, I don't know, it's been almost 15 years now, and I've been doing volunteer work, and at first I thought, oh, maybe I'll do something totally different. But then I came back to what I know, which is therapy. And so I've been working with first a group of people who were who had a retirement home, Garden Court. People in Santa Barbara would know that. It's for low-income seniors. And so I had a group there for 3 years, I think. And we just talked about problems and things that people had. And now I have, for the last 3 years, I've been working with a group called Doctors Without Walls. And these are doctors, nurses, acupuncturists, health professionals who work with the homeless, all volunteers. And so I was the first psychotherapist to appear there 3 years ago. Now there are 2 more, and we are there for women. This is a women's clinic, and so I work with the women, and believe me, they have a lot of problems. I can't solve them, but hearing them and helping them understand that they're still the people that they have been, and they've come into very bad circumstances, many of them.
I was fishing for the fact that you also play tennis on a regular basis.
I play tennis. I've played tennis all my life through all of the, no, not all my life, since I was 15 and arrived in Detroit. And I played for my high school team there. And so with short intervals of pregnancies and so on, I've always played tennis. So I'm still playing tennis, and I play doubles now. And twice a week I have a group I play with. I'm blessed with good health. That's, you know, at my age, I don't have any chronic diseases. And I have a wonderful life here. I am living with an artist here who has a room in the house and a studio outside. And
you're up here on the Riviera in Santa Barbara?
Here in the Riviera in Santa Barbara. And he used to be in Santa Barbara 30 years ago, and then lived in Oregon for many years.
And his paintings are behind you on the wall, right?
His paintings are behind me on the wall. And he's got lots of paintings in his studio.
And his name is?
His name is John Haugsee, Haugse.
So, Eva, can you tell me what lessons you think you learned in life?
Oh! Well, I think maybe the biggest lesson I have learned is not to worry, not to look into the future very far.
And can you control worrying, would you say?
Pardon?
Can you control whether you worry or not?
I can.
Uh-huh.
And I just don't worry. I've had a kind of a stomach problem, which I have never had. And John said to me, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it, because I have to see a gastrointestinal person, a doctor. And I said, I'm not worried. The older you get, the less you need to worry, because I used to worry about my children,
Yeah.
I used to worry, everybody worries about their children. I mean, they do things that are outrageous. Look what they're doing in Isla Vista,
Deltopia.
Can you imagine?
But that is a good thing that you're saying, is you can control whether you worry or not, and it doesn't.
You can control, well, because after a while you just don't worry anymore. I mean, most of us worry about being ill, having cancer, doing, they're going to do tests. I could have cancer, I could have this, I could have anything, okay? Well, I'm 90 years old.
Yeah.
I've lived an incredible life, and you can't have more than life, So you just need to worry less. I don't have to worry about my children. They are in their 60s and 50s, They're worrying about their children. And I don't need to worry about my grandchildren. They have parents and grandparents they have parents, and I just get pleasure, I have a lot of pleasure. I have a book group, a reading group. I always used to be the youngest, now I'm the oldest. Because, my friends, most of my friends have died at my age. So I had made new friends. That was always my thing when I was young, because I had to leave my old friends, okay? So now I still have to leave my old friends because they died, but to make new friends like I did then. I learned to do that.
And any advice on how to go about making friends?
Well, I'm so lucky because a lot of them came to me. John is 76 years old, okay? So he had a lot of friends here that he knew many years ago when he lived here. So they became my friends too, They have dinner here, they drop in, and so most of my friends are in their 60s, 70s,
But when you were younger,
80s.
You seemed to make friends easier.
I've always made easy friends, yes.
So if you were to give advice to people how to make friends, what would you say?
I would say you give a lot and don't expect a whole lot in return, okay? And you give because you want to and because it feels good, and not because you think it. And giving is just, you can do a lot of things, like you invite a couple for dinner. They love it, and I like it. I can still cook. I can still, do things, entertain. I like it, and I don't fuss a lot. I don't feel I have to show off. I don't think, we go through stages in life where we have to, if you invite the boss, you have to be on your best behavior. We go through stages, and I've gone through all of them. So I don't need to impress anybody anymore. But you're still in a stage of life where you have to impress. You have to impress your
your friends, your family, your, but you know, at this stage in life, you don't have to impress anybody. You just do things because you want to.
Although to a degree, people don't need to impress others as much as they think they do. Sometimes if they're more themselves, they might get along even better.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, you said it well,
Yeah.
right. Okay. So, and we spend a lot of stressful time trying to impress, you know, because it is stressful because you have to do something which you doesn't come natural at the moment, you know. And a lot of marriages are fail because of that, you know, that you try so hard, and then you go to a therapist and you try harder.
I know I've been there.
Yeah.
Well, lastly, if I may, how would you like to be remembered?
Oh my goodness. Well, I know I'll be remembered by this house, which I have lived in for 40 years with Bud. I will be remembered as by my children and grandchildren, especially in those 40 years, because this house has been a family house. Everybody loves it. They come here. The kids bring their friends. We barbecue. You know, it's just been a place where people congregate. And we've had 10 weddings here. Several of my children have been married here, and it's
Do you think a house can remember you?
the house.
You said your house will remember you. It could be argued that a
No,
house-
I don't think the house can remember me.
Okay.
I think that the children, grandchildren will remember, especially the grandchildren will remember being in this house. I just had a 90th birthday, and they gave me this huge thing that they had composed about what they would remember, you know, and it's amazing. I want to be remembered as family, you know, because
As a
I
family
have.
person.
I'm a family therapist. I love families. I've worked with so many families, and I see my own family, and it's. I think that I'm the only one grandparent left in my family. Sharon, my daughter-in-law for many years, just lost her mother at 103. And so there are no other grandparents of these 11 children who are now all adults. But so be it. They call me Ema, E-M-A, E-M-A, and Bud was Bud Paw. So, you know. And they all come back. They come, you know, we're on the way to so-and-so. Can I stay here with my boyfriend? Sure, you know.
And partly maybe they want to come here because you're not judgmental of them.
That's right, okay, and that's the other thing, you know. I think we were all judgmental with our children. You have to be. And slowly, you have to learn to let go and to stop, you know, and let them be. Not only that, but to support them in whatever they're doing.
So that's interesting. Do you feel parents need to be judgmental?
Well, yeah. You have to say, you know, don't go near the water, okay, when you're 5 years old, or, you know, or, you know, you can go this far but not that far. and don't lie to me, you know. I mean, yeah, you have to do certain, but when the kids are grown, and you know, by the time they leave to go to college, they're out of your life, more or less. They have another life.
Although it could be said that's not judgmental. You're being judgmental is evaluating whether someone's good or bad by their behavior. But by saying don't go near the water, that's just a practical
Safety.
rule. Safety, yeah.
Yeah. But they see it as judgmental.
Good point. Okay.
And, you know, we keep them from doing things that we feel are dangerous and they think is just perfectly normal, like using drugs, for instance, or anything like that, you know. Not in my house, okay? And so, but what they do now, there are some parents who forever are parents, and I think we have to get out of the step aside of parenting role and just sort of hang out with your kids and enjoy them. And so, you know, if your son tells you that he's lost his job, or he didn't get the job he wanted, or whatever, you're just empathetic, you know, and you don't ask a lot of questions. There's one thing that I try to teach my the people that I work with as a therapist, which may sound odd, and that is not to ask why questions, unless you are a scientist.
Interesting. And why is that, if I may?
Okay. Why is that? Now, when you say, why is that, that is a question that I can answer. But there are a lot of questions, why questions, that make you defensive, you know. If I ask you, why do you want to do this project of interviewing all these people, okay? Now you have to think about this, you know, and you have to think, well, why am I doing this, you know, and you know. So instead of saying, why are you doing this, you could say, how do you do this? Okay? How do you do this gives you some information. Why does not. It gives you defensive answers.
Interesting, yeah. How dare you ask me why I'm doing this interview? Well, so good talking with you, Eva. You have a lot of wisdom and warmth. And may I get a quick shot of your home for your kids to be able to watch for
and outside. It's gorgeous.
Okay, I'll do that. Well, thanks so much.
Okay, you're welcome. It was fun. Yeah, it was very good. And it's nothing more interesting than talking about yourself, is it?
Well put. Okay. Well, here's Eva's home, the living room. And this is mainly for her family to have, so I'm sure they had a lot of happy family memories. I'm Larry Nimmer. I've known Eva since I've been about 9 or 10, I believe. The Landeckers and the Menkins have been family friends. So I'm saying to the camera that I've known you since I was about 10 years old. You have a lot of art in the house. Beautiful home. We'll look outside at the pool in a moment. Always been interested in your
kitchen.
Yeah, okay, your daughter Judy's work. It's always done interesting work.
I forgot to tell you, Judy's an artist.
Oh, you did mention Judy's an artist, yeah.
She did those bananas up there.
The banana. Oh, uh-huh. That's cool. Ripe bananas.
She loves to do bananas.
Uh-huh. The barber chair. That's
The
something.
barber chair.
Beautiful old piece. May I look inside your refrigerator?
What?
May I look inside your refrigerator? Do you mind?
No.
It's always instructive. Okay. Thank you. I do that on my touring with the candidates too. Doss Williams one time had a hard time. People's comments. I'm going to look this way too if I may. May I?
What, dear?
Can I go this way?
Well, yeah, but that one room is torn up because we're going
Okay.
to have a plumber here on Thursday.
So should I not go
Don't
this
do
way?
this room here.
Okay.
I'm going to close the door here because
Okay.
the crawl space is in here.
Gotcha.
Yeah, these are photos. These are Judy's.
Nice.
Some of those.
This is your study?
This is my study.
Oh, over here is your study? Okay.
This is nice. I used to see clients there, and it used to have a couch, and it used to look different. That's Bud. Yeah. Those are my 4 kids up there.
Santa Barbara. You have a Mac. There's your wonderful yard
Yeah,
and view.
yeah, it's a great view out there.
Okay, well, thanks so much. Say bye-bye to the folks in TV land.